One of the worst parts of leaving the evangelical Christian faith, I'm going to get right into it, is looking back on my education, which again was also very fundamentalist and religious in nature because I was going to a Bible-based private school. I'm not talking like a Catholic college prep school. I'm talking about the emphasis was not on being better members of society. The emphasis was on the interpretation of the Bible. This old-ass, dusty, crusty book that was written 2,000 years ago by a bunch of men for men. I have had so many lectures and so many sermons teaching me, quote unquote, teaching me about the historical accuracy of certain biblical events. I have so much knowledge about the Bible itself. I can tell you the 10 plagues of Egypt. I can tell you all of the books of the New Testament in order and all of this, kind of ridiculous information. But also, what a lot of people who weren't raised in such an intense environment might not realize is that an understanding of history, being taught history in our classes, which obviously on a state level or federal level, there's some kind of requirements for social studies. And I know that Oklahoma's Board of Education actually has a lot of awareness in the news, or mentions in the news cycle right now because of Ryan Walters and this idea of social studies being an accurate reflection, a quote unquote accurate reflection of Oklahoma's history, which is just this brushing aside of anything related to narratives that don't suit Christian nationalism, and I'm not trying to get into that here, but even before all of that, the private school I went to, all of our history that we were taught, so world history, United States history, any kind of history class had to be shaped in such a way that the Bible was still portrayed as accurate. And one of the worst parts about realizing how deep the manipulative machine goes in the Christian church is having to sift through all of I graduated top of my class, right? I was a valedictorian in high school, not to brag or anything, but I'm telling you that to explain how studious I was and how scholarly I was, and I was very much diving into whatever history lessons they were giving me. Whatever they wanted to tell me about world history, I was like, yeah, no, got it. Okay, the earth is only 6,000 years old. Got it. Cool. I was passing all of the tests. I was buying into all of it. It's so embarrassing now, okay? But I did. I fell for the whole thing. And so now as an adult, 12 years later, I'm still learning things that I was like, oh, actually, I was taught this way. In reality, this is the real historical, analysis of this specific event in human history. Or, oh gosh, humans have actually been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And my bad, you guys, I was a young earth creationist for the first two-thirds of my life. It's really hard for me to kind of sift through that. And it's not to say I'm not doing, my own education. And it's not to say that people who grew up outside of that environment don't have to do their own education as adults, because even in secular public schools here in the current United States climate, again, there's a lot of rewriting of history just even in public schools, right? I'm totally aware of that. This is also true for science, of course, too, right? Another terrible part is that I did not have an understanding of evolution until I taught myself about it. I didn't have an understanding of how the universe works until I taught myself about it. And that's why I got really into science once I started deconstructing from evangelical Christianity, because I was like, whoa. Everything I thought I knew about reality is apparently based on a powerful belief system that keeps people in line. And there's all of this insidious propaganda just in my Bible class. There's no fucking reason why I was being taught these false claims as a child. And it does hold people back. And so I guess on the other hand, one of the best parts about leaving evangelical Christianity, right, is the fact that you can start learning the truth about how the world works and about how history has gone and all of that. But it's also one of the worst parts because it sucks to feel like you have to re-educate yourself on such a fundamental level. The most significant result of this specific consequence that I'm talking about here, the most impactful thing that I have had to reteach myself is about Christian Zionism. And I've talked about this extensively, and I will continue to talk about it because I will maintain that Christian Zionism is the most harmful result of Christian or evangelical Christian indoctrination, okay? Because I was told in Bible class as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, to proclaim myself as a proud Zionist. And you know, this is what, early 2000s, mid 2000s, you know, around a little bit before 2010. I graduated high school in 2010. So this is like, you know, has nothing to do with the most recent October 7th cycle of Israel's occupation and ethnic cleansing, etc. And I was told, you know, I talk about how because we're taught about the book of Revelation and Armageddon and the end times, which is another terrible aspect about evangelical Christianity, like just an apocalyptic agenda or an apocalyptic message in any way, shape, or form is predicated on fear. It perpetuates fear, and it keeps people outsourcing or bypassing their own accountability so that they don't have to take care of the climate, so that they don't have to fix this world because God's going to come back. Jesus is going to come back and sweep them all up away anyway. And not to mention that Christian Zionism at its core is also anti-Semitic because it positions the Jewish people as pawns in Christian mythology's beloved obsession with the end times in the first fucking place, right? So I had to, like, coming out of that realization, one of the worst parts about growing up as an evangelical Christian and then walking away is realizing how harmful your beliefs used to be. Like, the fact that I used to call myself a Zionist is absolutely embarrassing. I feel so much shame and guilt about that. Now, do I have a little bit of grace for myself and others who were literal children when they were calling themselves Zionists? Like, yes, I understand that indoctrination is the fault of the indoctrinators, not the indoctrinatees, or whatever, you know, language you want to use there. But the reality is I still feel very guilty and ashamed of the fact that I was out here unknowingly, without the proper education, saying like, yeah, I'll support Israel at all costs, apparently even genocidal costs. I was not taught about the Palestinians. I never heard the word Palestine when I was told to be a Zionist. And it's like, it sucks so bad. And of course, again, this also is kind of one of the best parts about leaving evangelical Christianity, in the sense that now I have a better understanding of the actual history of the 1948, 1967 events in the history of Palestine, just in the last 100 years, as far as the statehood of Israel continuing its occupation, bolstering its occupation with military force funded by the United States, and how we have been not just complicit on a secular level, but propped up and promoted through the religion of evangelical Christianity, who wants to establish the state of Israel as the homeland for the Jewish people, not for any particular love for Jewish people, but because in doing so, it leads Christians closer to their beloved end times prophecy of when Jesus is going to come back to rapture them. That is so dark and sinister on so many levels, and dehumanizing of so many different groups of people there. Like, please be prepared for me to continue talking about this for the rest of my life. Oh my good goddess. So one of the worst parts, again, about leaving evangelical Christianity is coming to terms with how much of your own understanding of the world and your own recognition of all of the lies you were told. And again, it's not like I actually think that my specific individual teachers were actively and intentionally lying to me, right? Like, I'm not going to be the one to sift through and say, you were intentionally lying to me, you were actually using me to get money, or whatever. Like, they all kind of believed the same things. They were just preaching what they knew. Do you know what I mean? Where I think the responsibility needs to be held is in the leadership. I really do, unfortunately. Like, it has to, the accountability really needs to be held somewhere. And I stand up for everyday Christians all of the time, because I know, growing up in that environment, the children who were indoctrinated into this belief system, they are victims. They are of a massively funded propaganda machine that is filtering into the church congregations. And I guess this is a great point to call out my typical disclaimer. about how I'm not necessarily trying to hold everyday Christians accountable for their leaders. I'm not hating on individual everyday Christians. I think there are some very wonderful Christians out there, especially Christians who specifically fight against Zionism messaging and propaganda. I think that's great because guess what? There are Palestinian Christians out there who very much deserve our support and recognition just on a secular point of view. I'm like, hey, we need to stand up for these people who currently are not getting access to humanitarian aid, who currently are currently and have been completely dispossessed of their own land and are witnesses and the victims of very serious state-led institutional violence on behalf of the nation, quote unquote, of Israel. So there's a lot to the actual harm that evangelical Christianity does bring about. But as I always say, the most harmful result is, in fact, the violence against the Palestinians.